Good morning and welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I am Deanna. I feel so underdressed today. It is getting to be so warm. I'm wearing a tank top. I'm sorry. You know, these days, it is good to see you. Happy Wednesday. Great to have you back. Kaz, I love having you for this summer when you're not teaching. Great to see you and a huge welcome home. Your pictures were so pretty. Gayla in Missouri, great to see you. Kirsten, it is coffee time. Yay. Robin, good to see you. That event was it not this past weekend, the weekend. It was this past weekend. Was it the past weekend that there was the event with the other hookers in Wisconsin? That was so many beautiful rugs were kicked up in that post. I hope everybody saw that. That was just beautiful. Mom, you logged on. I will see you the day after tomorrow. We're celebrating my sister's birthday on Friday. So I'm thinking I will not run a show on Friday night because we're celebrating her birthday in the afternoon and in another part of the state, and that is prone for disaster. So what I think I'm going to do is run an extra show next week. So I think I'll be on with you Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. So I make up for that day. I know a lot of you support me on Patreon and I appreciate it. I want to be sure I put out good content 3 times a week. And if I don't, I want to be able to catch up from it. So let's do that. I'll remind you at the end of the show. Linda, great to see you in Massachusetts. And Cindy, good morning in Northern Illinois. Karen, great to see you. Saying welcome back to Kaz. You're sprawled out on the floor tracing your new pattern. Oh, Karen, it's going to be amazing. Barbara, it's great to see you. Good morning. Today we have a great show. I was so lucky last night when I got home and I checked the mail. The present for my sister arrived just in time, thank goodness. I know she doesn't watch this show, so I will say I got her a beautiful handbag. I just discovered the handbags that are made by this person called Patricia Nash. I'm always late to the game, but they're like beautiful leather handbags with these amazing floral prints on them. And they're not tacky looking, they're quite nice looking. So I got one used off eBay, but I got her a new one because I thought birthday time, something special. Really fell into the rabbit hole. Just really, really beautiful. Probably everybody knows about them, and I'm not into handbags, so I missed it all. Jane, great to see you. In April, great to see you. Well, I have a show Monday, July 4th. Kaz, that's a great question. I think I will. I think I will because I'm sure we're going to go see fireworks before. We'll probably see several fireworks shows, but that'll be at night. Um, yeah, I don't see why not. I don't think there's anything happening on the 4th. I think I will. And you know what? I'm just remembering now that you said that. Friday is Canada Day. Is that true? Is Friday Canada Day? Am I right with that? Because if that's the case, oh, Friday is Canada Day. You know, why don't we do this? Oh, this is so tricky, isn't it? I don't want to miss Canada Day either because I have a little surprise for you for Canada Day. You know what I'll do? I'm going to run the Friday show. It might be a little shorter. I might not run for 2 hours, but let's run the show on Friday on Canada Day because I have a Canada pattern that I want to put out and I want to celebrate some rugs from Canada. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to hustle. I'll get the show ready in advance and I will be with you for Friday. Let's do cocktail time. And maybe what I'll do is, gosh, I don't know. I'll tell you on Friday if I'm going to do the Monday show. I'll just make sure there's no like festivals or something going on that the kids would be like aching to see. But I think I probably will run the Monday show. But I don't want to miss Canada Day because that's like the Canadian Independence Day, and I know a ton of us are logging on from Canada. So I will run a show at 7. Yeah, let's do. Yeah, I will run a show at 7 o'clock. I'm going to make it work, right? We can't skip Canada Day. That's a big holiday. I try to be on for the big holidays. I mean, I've been on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, on all the big holidays because I know a lot of people are also living very remotely away from your families, and it's something to do, isn't it? So forget I said it. Let's just do Friday. Let's do our business as usual. Chrissy, great to see you. Jay, good to see you. Doreen, good to see you. Well, thank you so much for noticing. These came off Etsy. They are let me show you. They are macrame. Does anybody do macrame as well? Macrame, are they in focus? Mermaid tails. And this girl in this Etsy store, I mean, you could just look up on Etsy macrame earrings, mermaid. She did them in 2 colors. This was the unicorn color, I guess because it had other colors in it, but then there was a traditional mermaid color that was just like blues and purple. That's one of the reasons I wore this tank top, indecent though it is, because it matched the earrings so well. But I love macrame. I haven't done it for years, so I'm kind of getting into it, tiptoeing in a little bit, because I see a lot of possibilities with doing like a rug hanging and having macrame hanging off the bottom of it, right? See like lots of combos lately, and when I look at these earrings, I think there's some possibilities there for some great crossover, right? Canada Day is Friday, Dave. I'm going to be on Friday for Canada Day. How can I not? I want to celebrate too. So that will be fun. Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, we will do it. We will have fun. I will make it work. I'll just get ready in advance. Joyce, great to see you. Good morning in Pennsylvania. Alicia, great to see you. Oh, I'm so glad that you're there. You just started hooking, but you do all crafts. I think that a lot of people will agree with that. They do so many different crafts. And, I think that is the thing to do, isn't it? It's like, cross pollinating all over the place, just crossing over into all other kinds of crafts. And I think when you do a lot of other crafts, whether they're fiber crafts or not, it gives you confidence, doesn't it, to approach something new and say, well, that looks like a tool that I've used in this craft. How different can it be? I got this. And that's a good starting point. Heidi, great to see you. Oh, it's nice. Great to see you. It's sunny in Belgium. That's so nice to picture. But yeah, feel free to talk about all the different crafts you do in there. That's part of the story that we're talking about today as we look at Judy Taylor's new book. I got in yesterday, and the bag came in time for the gift, and this package came, a mystery package that I didn't order, and I was thinking, oh, it feels like a book. I haven't ordered a book lately. And I opened it, and it's Judy Taylor's new book. My buddy Judy Taylor in Washington State, other side of the country. We've covered, I think, all of her books, and with great praise, great love, and adoration for all of her books. So this is the brand new one. I didn't know that it would be ready so soon. This one just came out, and this is what we're going to talk about on the show today. I want to just take a minute because I have not yet done this on our Facebook group. If you are on our Facebook group, which is Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club, if you are on our Facebook group, this is just a small aside. We had a bit of an incident on Monday, and it was an unfortunate one because it was the sort of worst kind of shakedown personality-wise that we've had on our page. And we won't go into details because if you saw it, you could not have missed it. It was a proper pig's breakfast. And it escalated and it snowballed and it became quite bad and it became quite stressful. And at the end of it, the root of the day was there was a post put up that did not follow the rules of the group that had to do with fundraising. And I was hugely at fault because in the morning I had gone on, because Mondays are Madcap Mondays for us and everybody's allowed to sell stuff on our page on Mondays. So there were like dozens of posts, and I usually like them and permit them and let them into the group at the same time. And I saw a post that had a frame, and I did that. I assumed it was selling a Chetty Camp frame, and I liked it, and I let it go into the group, and then I moved on with my day and had an exceptionally busy day and did not return until the evening after I had been like out of commission for about an hour and a half to a real more than a tempest in a teacup. It was like, yeah, it was a biblical tempest in a teacup, and a Shakespearean tempest in a teacup. It was bad. But anyway, I think the source of it was a lot of people chimed in to say that post was not allowed on the page, which is fair enough. I, scanning the post, did not see any comments that I thought were outrageously rude. And I don't feel like in our group there are very many outrageously rude people. When I feel like the tone of something is escalating, I write secretly and privately to somebody and say, you know, but it's a rare occurrence because everybody has always been very nice, and we are nearing 10,000 people. But this was unfortunate, and I think part of the reason it snowballed was because the person who who put up the post that was having a bit of a misunderstanding in terms of the language of the post kept saying that I had approved the post, and then there was some confusion about which Deanna I was. So I'm going to be putting up, I know a lot of you staunched this early on in the thread, but I just want to say here, for those of you who watch me, that I'm Deanna David, and my brand is Ribbon Candy Hooking, and I do these shows, as you know, at least 3 days a week, if not more, and I have this is the third year. But there is another Deanna who's much more famous than me with a much bigger brand in Canada. And it's not Deanna, it's Dion Fitzpatrick. So Dion Fitzpatrick is in Canada. She does a lot with Chetty Camp Frames and the whole Canadian School of Hooking. She has a wonderful company, beautiful business. She has done endless good work for rug hooking and is a big, big player in the field, much bigger than I am. But I am a different Deanna. So I think a lot of the confusion happened because one of us is called Dion, one of us is called Deanna. And the reason I don't often say my name, except when we're doing the show here, just to say hello, is because I think it is prone to confusion. So I just want to be really clear about that. And I will, when I have more presence of mind, I was super stressed yesterday about the way that this shook out. But I will make a post that is prominent on our Facebook page to remind you and to let new people know there can be confusion because we have similar names, but they are spelled differently. We are in different companies and we have different brands. So I'm sure that you all know that, but just in case you're tuning in for the first time, that was a bit awful. I just saw it and scrolled on. Yeah, it happens, Alicia. It happens. It went a bit too far. And, you know, it was during that hour and a half that I was out of commission and didn't look at my phone. That never happens. So I was frustrated with myself, too, because I was very much at fault for liking the video, the post, and not reading it properly. But that reminded me to not be in such a hurry in the morning when I have to, Kirsten and I go in and approve the posts or not. So I was approving the posts for Madcap Monday, and it was just like, yep, 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 yep. I saw all kinds of pretty things for sale, and I thought that was one of them. Sorry about that if you got caught in the crosshairs of that fantastic time. We are about to have a fantastic time now because this book by Judy Taylor, you know how I love all of her books. I'm going to say not only is this my favorite of her books, and do I think it's the best of her books, I think it's the best rug hooking book so far. I really do. This is just extraordinary. Wait and see. I have a beautiful slideshow for us. I was just amazed. Now, when I opened up Judy Taylor's new book, this one is called The New Joy of Hooking with Yarn because there was an original Joy of Hooking with Yarn. This is the new one. This is completely different. It is not the same content. There are not crossovers, right? This is not like an update, a reprise, this an expanded new edition. This is a completely different book with all new stuff. So just know that if you own the other one, that this is well worth checking out. You know, she always puts such lovely things. She always gives me a little note when she sends me something. She is so generous. She is such a nice person. And I want to remind you that Judy Taylor also has that Facebook group for restoring rugs, like restoring old rugs. And she is scholarly, and super knowledgeable about different kinds of fixes for different kinds of rugs, whether it's old or new. If it has damage and the dog got at it or something happened, or it's an 1860s rug, she will know how to fix it. And that Facebook page is beyond helpful and forthcoming with tips and solid information about restoring rugs. So that's one of her projects besides her company, which is called Little House Rugs. She's at work right now, but I'm sure she's going to watch this video later. And she's also got the Rug Hooking Daily, right? So she puts this in here too. This is another site that you can log on to where there's all kinds of conversations, sometimes contests, kind of like challenge things, but lots of things to read, lots of things to see, lots of things to learn. So those are two of her projects besides her business and besides her book writing. She is a busy lady. We looked at, this is one of the books we looked at. She puts in ads for the different books. We have looked at repairing hooked rugs. So that is a book of hers, and we covered that maybe 6 months to a year ago. And if you have a book besides the Facebook page that you need to restore or repair, that is the book for you. So be looking for that one by Judy Taylor too. She always puts in a nice card too with the different, her pretty rug there. With the different sorts of yarns that there are, because she only hooks with yarn. And one of them is mine. This is the Ribbon Candy Hooking one down here. But she puts a bunch of different companies who do different kinds of yarn, different weights of yarn for hooking. So this is extremely helpful. That always comes with her orders. And then a list of all of the books she's done. And I think we've covered all of these. This one I think we did quite recently, the T-shirts. And then the Breaking the Boundaries we did quite recently. And then this is the one about repairing. This is what the first Joy of Rug Hooking looks like. So that one is wonderful. This is the one we're talking about today. So be careful if you're looking for this one specifically, the new Joy of Rug Hooking. And the link to this book on Judy's site is in the description of this video. So if you love the way that this looks, you can click on it, go right to her site, okay? Fantastic book. So let's start looking at it together. She's one of my favorite people, if not like one of the tippity tops. She's one of these people in this business who is so helpful, kind, generous with her knowledge, information, her time. Not everybody is like that in any business, but I feel particularly in this business, people like to hold their cards close to their chest and keep some special secrets. She's not like that at all. She's so, so kind. There are so many lovely pieces in this book. This is one that's just on the front piece that I really loved. It's The Lady and the Unicorn, adapted from the tapestry, right? 34.5 by 45.5 wool yarn on linen. And this is just one of the many beautiful pieces that she's done. I love looking at her books because there are so many of her original pieces in here. When I look at it and I look at the caption for all of these rugs, and so many of them say Judy Taylor, I'm thinking, I must be asleep at the wheel here. I don't know how she gets so much done. It's crazy. So this is just one of the first things that you see when you open the book that's a wonderful example of hooking with yarn, because we so often think about rug hooking as being traditional rug hooking is being done with wool and wool strips. Now, whoever made that rule up, right? Because at one point, and it's got to be, this is another one of Judy Taylor's that was done in yarn. This is Magic Carpet, 35 inches by 26 inches, designed and hooked by Judy, wool yarn on linen. The reason I like this example and The Lady and the Unicorn is because these are examples of hooked pieces, hooked with yarn, that look very traditional, ambitious, right? Really grand. Because for whatever reason, and I think it is the whole process of so many people being certified in the middle of the 20th century, we got kind of an idea about what proper rug hooking was, and it was strips, and it was thin strips. Now, it's hard to break away from that, even though it's decades later. It's hard to break away from that and say, listen, if you're pulling material up through a backing with a hook, you are hooking. Whether you are hooking with strips or yarn or cut up plastic bags, like what is it called? Oh, what is it called? The plastic yarn, plarn, right? Whatever you're hooking with, you are hooking, right? There is no hierarchy. There is no totem pole in the hooking. You are hooking. So I love looking at these kinds of examples of very traditional, very intricate, very highbrow looking work that is done with yarn. Because somewhere along the line, after the middle 20th century, and we've covered this many times, but just chronology-wise, there came Claire Murray, right? One of my great idols. I still have to go see her. We had to delay it because she was moving shop, but I need to get in touch with her again. At one point, she started hooking, Claire Murray, very visibly in the Nantucket style. In Nantucket style, rug hooking simply means you're hooking with yarn. That's all it means. Instead of strips or something else, you're hooking with yarn. That is Nantucket hooking. So somewhere along the line, people started to do the Nantucket hooking because Claire Murray taught, or at least her stores were teaching for quite a long time. In Oregon, they have a hook in, I think, every Friday at her store on Cape Cod. So, it's like there was this kind of divide, and we do continue to talk a lot more about hooking with wool strips than we do hooking with yarn, but they are absolutely both equal, viable, perfectly good means to an end. And when you look at something that looks just like the best sort of oriental carpet you've ever seen, and you realize that it's hooked with yarn, I think it's nice to acknowledge that it isn't a sort of promo gown. It's an original pattern by Judy Taylor, and it's hooked with yarn. And in some regards, hooking with yarn for, hey Nancy, particularly for beginners, is not a bad idea, because one of the great trip ups when you begin your rug hooking is when you're pulling up your strips, they twist underneath, right? And then they come up all twisty on top. And if you're the kind of person that immediately starts thinking, what's wrong with me? I was not cut out to do this. I'm the worst. I can't do this. Sometimes it's nice as a beginner if you feel very defeated by attempting to hook with wool strips before you get into the hang of it, right? Because you always hope that you'll get it sooner rather than later, but sometimes it's later. Yarn kind of avoids that problem because you're pulling up, instead of a little sort of rectangle, the top of a wool strip, you're pulling up a little dit dot of yarn, and there is no right or wrong side, and there's no such thing as twist. So in some regards, hooking with yarn is a great way to get started because you eliminate that particular pratfall that befalls every new rug hooker without a doubt. So she shows some great examples at the beginning of the book of hooking with yarn through the whole book. I love this picture of her, and I love this caption she writes. The artist bio in here says, Judy Taylor is an artist, a farmer, rug hooker, hand spinner, an all-around wool enthusiast from the beautiful Green River Valley in Washington State. Her first book, Hooking with Yarn, sold out in its initial printing. Her other award-winning books include The Joy of Hooking with Yarn, Rug Hooker's Guide to the Yarniverse, T-Shirt Treasures, Save That Rug, Breaking the Boundaries, and The Boy Who Wrote Poetry, which is about her brother and his poetry. I'm ordering that book because I read the blurb on it, and it's heartbreaking and beautiful, and I've got to have it. Many of her finished rugs, kits, and patterns and YouTube videos can be viewed at, and the website is www.littlehouserugs.com. And this is a great picture of her, and she writes, subjects in the photo may be older than they appear. I think that is so funny. I love how in this photo she is using what she calls her mushroom hook. So this mushroom hook is a Lacus hook or Lacus hook, L-A-C-I-S. That's one of these brands like Aunt Lydia's, or one of these craft brands that appears at the big craft stores like Michael's and Joann's. L-A-C-I-S. I've always said Lacus, but I might be wrong. They are not an expensive brand, and their hooks are great. So when I teach beginner classes and I'm stocking a hook, I stock a Lacus hook. Either the mushroom type that she's using, which is like the doorknob type with the big ball handle, or the thinner ones. And I usually give people a choice, because when you see people hooking with those big sort of doorknob ones, Judy calls her mushroom hook, I hear that it's better for like carpal tunnel and for just sort of ergonomically more helpful to some people. So I haven't tried that myself, and I don't have that particular problem at this moment. So I hook with the regular Lacus hooks, but they're all good hooks. They're not expensive hooks at all. Judy sells them in her store. It's a good thought if you're a beginner to get one of these hooks, because she always hooks with this hook. And if you do have any issues with your wrist or with carpal tunnel, do think about getting this style of hook as opposed to the one that is slimmer, more like a pencil. So really helpful. And it's just another example of how Judy uses stuff that isn't crazy expensive, right? You don't need crazy expensive stuff to have a good time or to make progress in this craft. Before I get to that image, I just want to read a little bit of her introduction, because although we talk about Judy a lot, we don't always talk about her very personally, right? We look at the books and we go, isn't that fantastic? Isn't that focused? Isn't that helpful? But we don't know a lot about her personally. And she wrote such a beautiful introduction that is very personal in this book that I want to share part of it with you. Alicia says, that's why I believe yarn is better as well as the variety available. That's a very good point. And Judy makes this point too. And we're going to come to it today, but she makes the point that, actually, I'm going to wait. Why do I keep going out of focus today? This seems odd. So anyway, I want to read from her introduction a little bit, because I think it really humanizes and personalizes who she is, because she's such an accessible person to reach in the rug hooking community. She says, I learned to hook rugs in 1990. For the benefit of the youngsters reading this book, let me set the stage a bit. In 1990, we didn't have a computer. This may come as a shock to some, but it's true nonetheless. No such thing as the internet or email. We had no cell phones, no Facebook, no Instagram, no cable TV. And if we wanted to take a picture, we carried this thing called a camera with us, then waited a week while our photos were developed. I mention this primitive state of affairs because at the time, it was difficult to get information in the Pacific Northwest about hooking rugs with yarn. There were many books in the library and 2 magazines, Rug Hooking magazine, which we still have, and Atha, which we still have. Those are the main 2 magazines still. But they almost exclusively concerned themselves with hooking rugs with strips of wool, not yarn. I discovered rug hooking entirely by chance. We had purchased a small farm and started our flock of Jacob sheep and Angora goats. I'd learned to shear them and spin their wool. I loved spinning. I loved the rhythmic nature of the turning wheel and the tactile pleasure of the wool running through my fingers. Naturally, I'd hoped to find a way to use those bursting bags, boxes, and baskets of my homespun yarn. I tried all the usual things, knitting. Here we go, Alicia, right? We're talking about all the different things we do. Knitting, crochet, weaving, even macrame and latch hook. But none of these crafts appealed to me quite as much as spinning. Then one day, while attending the Scandinavian festival in a tiny Washington town called Poulsbo, I entered a Claire Murray rug shop filled with large rugs hooked with loops of yarn. I spoke to the sales clerk who happened to be demonstrating the craft and asked if it was easy to learn, asked if it was difficult to learn. And she said, "Oh, no, not at all," she assured me. I didn't believe her. I was certain it was very tricky to learn. But something told me that I was going to like it, and I signed up for the very next class. I will always remember the thrill of pushing my hook into the backing for the first time. Zing! I was captivated. I was making pictures with yarn. At one point, I asked the teacher if she'd ever hooked with homespun yarn. She said no, as if she'd never heard of the stuff. I could hardly wait to get home and try making a rug with my very own homespun yarn. So the introduction carries on, but she puts in some beautiful pictures of her with her sheep, right? And the Jacob, is it sheep? The Jacob in the window. It's a Jacob sheep, right? I hope that's the right word. I get confused sometimes between sheep and goats because I'm not a farmer. I need to learn a bit more. But she goes on to say that there's more about her biography, and it's just beautiful. She goes on to say that in the year 2000, Rug Hooking magazine put a call out for new book topics, ideas for book titles. She pitched the idea of doing a book about hooking with yarn, which we imaginatively named Hooking with Yarn. This was great. I loved having a book, and it made me feel legit. The sales were good, so good that the book soon sold out. I began to get frantic emails. Yes, we finally got a computer with dial-up, imploring, where can I get a copy of that book? And oh, hi, Marilyn, good to see you. Hey, Anita, good to see you. Now, this is the book, and you probably know it because it is considered one of the great classics of rug hooking, without a doubt. And she goes on to say, and this is something to be really cognizant of because we encounter this a lot. She said, a funny thing happened on Amazon that year. The price for used copies of Hooking with Yarn started to go up. The highest price I saw with my own two eyes was $1,500. Then it settled into the $70 to $80 range for a long time. This for a 64-page book that I sold for $17.95 new. This is just a reminder that when this does happen on Amazon, as it often does, you just take that hot minute, cool your heels, and wait for the return of normalcy, right? Because this is just supply and demand, isn't it? And it's super greedy sellers just putting the prices skyrocketing through the roof. So you never want to do that. That is absurd and anti-logical. Just wait or put the word out in these social media groups asking if anybody has it or anybody can sell it. But there aren't very many books that are worth $1,500. I think Judy's book, Hooking with Yarn, is worth it. If there's got to be, a top 10, it's in there. But nonetheless, she's right. It can be absurd what the prices of books can go for. So just get in touch with the author when you can. And of course, with Judy, you absolutely can. If you're looking for something, you find something that's scarce, always try to go to the author first. Try to find them some other way. She put some great quotes in this book, like this one by Dr. Seuss that says, "If you have never tried, you should. These things are fun, and fun is good." So sweet. It's just a beautiful book. Like all of her books, it is constant pictures, really lovely pictures. Alicia says, definitely hereditary. I come from a family of makers with yarn. It is a thing, and it's a confidence thing, and it feeds right into the next chapter of this book, this exact conversation. The next chapter is called How to Use This Book. Let me show you this slide on the monitor. I took these pictures last night after the book came, and I was sitting on the couch, and it was like lamplight. So I feel like the pictures don't look super, wait a minute, struggling with my monitor. I feel like the pictures don't look super crisp, but in the book they are super crisp. It's just me taking them with my phone and then sending them to the computer. So this chapter is called How to Use This Book. And in this part, I'm just going to share with you the beginning of this chapter. She writes, and this is Judy, right? This is her writing. She says, remember crayons? Think about how much fun it is to color with crayons. As a child, you could easily while away hours coloring. There was no limit to what you could do with crayons in your imagination. You didn't even need a coloring book, although they were fun too. A blank piece of paper and a few crayons were all that you needed to create beautiful pictures. When you opened up a brand new box of crayons, wow, the possibilities and the smell. Remember the smell? And all of those colors. They just cried out, use me first, like Harold and his proverbial crayon. Remember Harold and the purple crayon? The whole wide world was there for you to explore and create. Unfortunately, most of us grew up and forgot all about crayons. We moved on to more complex activities like math, driving cars, getting jobs, and doing our taxes, yet we never lost the yearning to create. So we seek out grown-up crafts like rug hooking to satisfy that lifelong desire to make things with our hands. But being grown-ups, I'm just going to come back to you here, but being grown-ups, we so often question our abilities. This is the crux of the thing, isn't it? How many times have we told ourselves, I can't draw, or I need help with the colors? When I hear these remarks from my students, I mention coloring with crayons, and some of that self-criticism melts away. I think that is such an important point, because when you think about it, this is the whole story of teaching put into a crucible, burnt down, and this is like the crux of it. This is what's left. You know, we do as children have so much confidence, and we're no insecurities, just wild and free. You're one precious, wild and free life. You just, anything that you take to, whether it's drawing or a sport or whatever, you just take to it like a duck to water, and you just run with it, and you figure it out as you go, and you improvise. And yes, having that kind of an attitude, that can-do attitude, no fear, it does take energy, right? And it takes practice when you're a grown-up, because you spend a lot of years in between the crayon days and today having people teach you things or certify you or tell you something or correct you. Now more than ever on Facebook, you think you're doing something right, and then there's 100 people in the same thread, hopefully not in our group, that want to tell you you did it wrong or you could do it better. And it's hard to file all that stuff sometimes. You take it personally. You assume, if you're a normal person with not like a sort of iron will and an impenetrable sense of self-worth, right? If you're not a super, super confident person, you do get to feeling sometimes like, yeah, I probably screwed that up, or maybe I better watch 75 YouTube videos before I give that another try, because I'm prone to disaster, I'm not good at doing this stuff, or I'm a slow learner. We feed this stereotype in ourselves, and it is good to remember, as Judy is saying, the crayon days, when it's just, you just do it, right? You just do it. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. Nobody's going to say anything to you. You are your own worst enemy. So she goes on in this chapter to kind of expand on that thought, and it's an important thought, because right at the beginning of the book, let me show you the other image that she puts in to sort of accompany the crayons, which I think are so inspiring. I think this is a memory that is universal, for us all, every generation. She puts this picture with the mushroom hook, all the different yarns to say, look, this is crayons. It's just crayons, right? It's a different material, but it's still your crayons. You play with it the same way that you would. She's very, very encouraging, and this book is so good for that. Let's keep going, because it really runs the gamut of things that are worth exploring. That was just the introduction, right? Chapter 1 gets into what is rug hooking, and this really is a great chapter, because she goes into, let me come back to you here, the history of rug hooking, like a short bit on the history of rug hooking, talks about antique rugs, and then she talks about the distinction, which is important for her as a teacher, and with her business, the distinction between the Nantucket, meaning with yarn, and traditional, which means with wool strips, right? So she talks about the difference between those things and defines those two things. She says traditional and Nantucket styles both use the same rug hook and the same backings, and in each style, loops are pulled through from the back to the front, but the hooking technique differs between yarn and fabric strips. She says in order to take full advantage of the fiber used. So for her, of course, it's yarn because of her life and her setting and all of her animals and her spinning. In punch hooking, the yarn is pushed from the back to the front using a special tool. So we know that. We'll hit on that many times in the future again. But she says, like any good fiber addict, I've tried them all, and I found Nantucket style suits me the best. I prefer the feel of the yarn in my hands as I work with the hook. It is very malleable. It fills in the space where you want it. I also really like working from the front so I can see how I'm doing. With punching, you're always working from the back. So she's making these distinctions in the text of this book just to remind you, nothing wrong with punching, right? Nothing at all wrong with punching, but it is worked in reverse. And you might find, I prefer punching, it goes a lot faster. I prefer doing this and filling it in. Everybody's different. And she's saying she's a fiber addict. She tries all the ways, but for her, this is the way that fits the best. Working with yarn, it's like levels on a stereo, right? Where you set them all to what you like, exactly the way that it sounds, right? This much treble, this much bass. I like the yarn over the strips. I like working on a frame rather than on my lap. I like, there's so many possibilities, not just two, right? I like hooking rather than punching. You know, you try them as you go, as time permits and as you're inspired, and you figure out what you like the best. But it's never about this is how you do it, baby. It's about figure out what you like the best and what works best for you, because when you are working with your body, right, it's going to work better and it's going to work faster. Which costs the most to use, yarn or strips? I would say yarn is less expensive to use because wool is always going to be expensive. Wool yarn is still less expensive. So for example, you can get a skein of wool yarn to dye for $4 from Briggs and Little, from the Maritime family where I get it. But it is very possible to hook or punch with yarn that is not 100% wool, that is either a blend or from the craft store. So not necessarily the yarn store where you'd get your knitting supplies, because in those places I sometimes pick up yarn that's like 30-something a skein when I have a very specific thing that I mean to do with it, not just for the joy of wasting cash, right? But in the big box stores like Michael's, Joann's, or online, you know, there are a lot of yarns that are not 100% wool and some that are 100% wool that are just less expensive. And they are not going to show up any worse or differently in your finished piece. Of course, you shouldn't be blocking, meaning heating at the end, a fiber that has a possible synthetic content, right? Because it might burn, it might just melt as you iron it. So you can't do the blocking, you can't do that part of the process if you're using a synthetic. But people through the years have used synthetics. And I have told stories on Coffee Time of artists who are very well known and very esteemed, who have only worked with Red Heart or Lion yarn for all of their careers, because the gold is always the gold, and it has been since the 1970s. And the cardinal red is always the cardinal red, and it never changes. And they like the sameness. They like being able to get a lot more of one supply. Maybe they work big. It's economical. It makes sense. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why you might choose materials that you choose. Other people will say, it's a tactile thing for me. If I'm going to do it, I like the feel of wool in my fingers. I like that connection. I have a thing about fiber. And if I'm not feeling a fiber in my hand that gets me excited, that makes me happy, that makes me content, then I'm not going to enjoy the process. That's a legit and different conversation. So even the supplies are a moving target. And you have to say to yourself, what can I afford? What makes sense? I don't want to spend so much on supplies that I have stomach cramps the entire time I'm working on this project, and I set the bar so high for myself because I've spent so much on it. That's how I was with knitting. I would spend so much on the skeins of yarn, and I would go, oh my, every time I dropped a stitch, like, you know, 6 inches behind in the piece, I would lose my mind. I would be down on the ground doing push-ups and crying at the same time because it was so stressful, because I had spent so much on the project. You don't want to do that, right? That's a sure way to set yourself up for failure and emotional train wrecks, unless you're normal. And then maybe you just bounce back from it like a normal person. But every part of this process you can control, and yarn can be very inexpensive. And if you find that you love it, if you find you love 100% acrylic yarn, then you are in business, because some of these big cake yarns have 15 to 20 colors in them, and you just sit and roll them into balls as each color changes, and you have 15 colors for $4 from the craft store, and that will work great. So I would say simple answer to that is yarn is cheaper. But it really depends on what you want the finished look to look like. It's very hard to do directional hooking with yarn. It's much easier and visible when you're trying to do something with any kind of directional flow to use wider wool strips. So it also depends on what you're doing and what kind of effects you want in your finished piece. I think that brought on a lot of conversation. Let me see. Donna says, what's the name of the book? The book is called The New Joy of Hooking with Yarn by Judy Taylor. And there's a link to it in the description of this video now. You can click right onto it. She sent the link to it this morning, because this is brandy new. Lynn says, I like mixing hooking and punching. To me, it looks more primitive, which is where I'm at now. I completely agree, Lynn. Your pieces have been beautiful. That last piece with the heart was so, so, so pretty. I agree. And I do the same thing. And I've done videos on doing punching for speed, like outlines or backgrounds, and then flipping the piece over and filling it in with rug hooking to get a bit more detail in certain areas. There's lots of combos that you can do. But it can absolutely be a mashup, right? It can be both for sure. Marilyn says late. Oh, that's okay, Marilyn. I think I caught that one. Where did I go? Karen said, I love using yarn because you're not stopping and starting so much. That's a good point too. So the conversation sometimes comes up with yarn. I'm probably not going to finish this content. Interesting. I'll have to think this through today. The conversation comes up with yarn a lot. I don't have any cakes that I can reach right now, but when I sell yarn, I always wind it into small cakes, and I wind it into cakes right from the hank myself, right? So I get a cake, and the conversation often comes up in class when I'm teaching, because I sometimes teach hooking with yarn or a combo. Some people will say, am I supposed to pull from the center or around the edge? Because as knitters, I think we're trained to not pull from the center, because if you get into the smaller part of the cake, the end of the cake, it's more kinked up, right? It's more kinked up in there, more of a hornet's nest, because it's been in the center, wound for so long. With rug hooking, I always pull from the center, and it is like the gift that keeps on giving. If you pull from the sides, right, your ball, your skein will roll all over the ground, Victorian postcard style, and cats will come out of nowhere and start playing with the yarn ball, guaranteed, right? So I always pull from the center, and it's always next to me, so it doesn't roll on the ground. Things don't get tangled. It's just like, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. You just keep, and it's a very good point. You could go 400 yards just pulling on that one piece without starting and stopping and worrying about tails up or tails down or what. Hey, Beverly, good to see you. Alicia said, I saw your video on using both. Oh, thank you. You know, it's just another technique. It's just another, as many techniques as we have in our bag of tricks, the more easy everything is, right? The more easy working is, but mostly the more confident you are. And if you approach your next project just with more confidence, then I feel like I have done my part, right? Because I can't reach everybody, and I can't reach everybody in person, but I can reach you this way. And if I can give you all the things that I figure out as I go along as a beginner myself, then I feel like that's helpful and useful. And then other people chime in and give me ideas and give us all more information. And you take it away and you feel confident, like you encounter a weird crossroads of a problem and you think, this rings a bell. I remember talking about this or hearing about this. I think I got this. And not slam on the brakes. Let me watch 50 YouTube videos and waste the next month, right? Which sometimes is the instinct, isn't it? Marilyn says, I use yarn. I haven't tried wool yet. You know, use whatever you like. If you're enjoying it, you should just keep going, right? Absolutely just keep going. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So she talks about, in the beginning section here, she encourages everybody to try everything. There we go. She says, I encourage you to try them all too, because who knows which will appeal to you. In my case, while I love wool fabric, let's face it, I grow yarn. My flock of sheep and goats lovingly produce piles of wool and mohair, which I spin and then send the rest off to be commercially spun for knitting and rug hooking. At this point, I will never run out of yarn. Welcome to my world. Yarn are us. She is so funny. I think I put another cute picture there. She has a lot of personal pictures in this book, which I really love. She always does funny stuff in her books, you know. This is one of the pictures she puts, having this conversation about yarn are us. The little goats standing on top of each other, I think, are insanely cute, impossibly cute. And then I move on to this image here because I'm not necessarily going through the whole conversation chronologically. This is next. But I just picked out some things about the book that I thought were really tremendous. And she said, you will be amazed when you learn what your leftover yarn could be doing for you. And she says more on recycling in chapter 7. So for example, at this point, she shows us the sweater and the rug. And she says rug hooking has been the go-to craft when reusing and recycling yarns from other projects. This yarn sweater on the left was ingeniously reused in this Foote rug. Foote is a Celtic word that means, or Irish word that means welcome. in this Foote rug. So in other words, something must have happened with the sweater. Maybe it got some holes. Maybe it's the wrong size. Maybe whatever, it went through the dryer. But this rug, this sweater was unraveled, and the yarn was used to make this rug. And as you can see, ingeniously enough, the person who made it, and that is Diane Warren, she made it, this is on linen, in the same design as the sweater itself. So if you think about it, if you have great memories of wearing this sweater, certain family occasions, or you wore it for a few years at the holidays or whatever, and you don't really want to get rid of it, you just use the same motifs as the sweater in this rug, and you use the actual yarn. You unwind it on your spinner, or just unwind it in your hands into a ball, right? I have videos on that too. So I thought that was a super, super interesting thing to look at, right? This book is just loaded with things like this that are just interesting to look at, interesting ideas. Chapter 2 is called Sundries You'll Need, meaning all the tools, the tips, everything, tools and things you need to buy, right? Which isn't a lot for this craft. This is a piece that's called Midnight Garden, designed and hooked by Gail Sherman Feetham, wool yarn on wool fabric, hooked with a fine hook. So Judy makes the point in this book. Now the background material to this is wool. Judy makes the point in this book that she uses her mushroom hook like all the time, unless she's doing a project like this. So she says in the book, like the pioneers of old, you don't need a lot of fancy stuff to get you started. The hook is the main thing, and you really only need one. Unlike knitting needles or crochet hooks, you do not need different sizes to hook different types of projects, and I'm going to add or different widths of strips. Since you only need one hook, you can splurge and treat yourself to a fancy wood one or ergonomically whatever one. This is paraphrasing. But I like to use the plain old mushroom hook from Lakis. I prefer a coarse hook, which is 2 millimeters, that goes through burlap or linen smoothly, while also ample size to keep my yarn on the hook, meaning in the crook of the hook, right? Because if it's not a big enough hook, your strip or your yarn is just going to fall out every time you pull it through. And then you're going to be saying, I keep screwing this up, what's wrong with me? It's your hook. And Judy says, the only time I use a smaller hook, meaning the metal part of the hook, is when I need to hook through a tighter weave fabric, like counted cross stitch or this example by Gail Sherman Feetham, because it's hooked into wool backing. Wool is a weave, right? So it's hooked into that. You need a much smaller hook to get through it. You cannot go through that with a traditional coarse or even like a medium hook, right? You would have to have a little tiny hook. So she's making the point, I have a tiny hook for these moments, right? It's not every time by any means. And here she is showing you hooking into backing with her mushroom hook, and she's showing you that traditional Nantucket style, which is the Claire Marie style, to wrap it around your legs on your lap. Obviously, you can only do this technique with large pieces because a small piece isn't big enough to wrap around. This has potential to bring up all kinds of problems with your neck, with your back. For me, it does. So I go to a frame, and she has other pictures of herself using, for example, on the same page, her frame. So she typically does use a rug hooking frame, but she wants to show you people also do that. Claire Marie has always hooked on her lap, always. She can certainly afford a frame, but she has always hooked on her lap. So it just goes to show, experiment and try. If you are not having success with something, it is not you, it is your tools. And you just have to try something different, figure out what else might work for you by gathering information or looking at a book like this that has endless information. The whole rest of that chapter is just absolutely gorgeous. And chapter 3 moves on to learning to hook. And this chapter shows you in immense detail how to hook. So for people that are like, really need pictures, even over videos or text or someone teaching you in person, sometimes being taught in person, you'll end up stabbing your leg, Alicia. That's entirely possible. Sometimes being taught in person, from my experience with teaching, is sometimes people tend to shut down when the teacher comes over because they're afraid that they're doing something stupid and they kind of want to guard against the teacher seeing what they're doing. It depends on what kind of person you are. These kinds of things can pop up in people's heads. Sorry, I'm just looking for our, oh shoot, I shut it down. All right, we saw that one. I was wondering why I couldn't find our slide. Sorry about that. Let me come back here. There we go. I think that's our next one. Yeah. So she talks all about how to actually do the hooking part of rug hooking, and there are pages and pages of series photos to show you just how. She even gives you a series of how to hook wool strips, fabric strips, right? So although this book is about hooking with yarn, she also tells you how to hook with strips. Just so you know, this book is very complete. It's encyclopedic in its completeness, right? There's a section on, I show this one because I think this is absolutely beautiful, Home Sweet Home, 18 by 30, designed and hooked by Judy Taylor. She says, believe it or not, this rug was hooked with t-shirts on linen backing, so it will be machine washable. Hooking with t-shirt strips is almost exactly the same as hooking with yarn, just less expensive and more durable. And for more information on that, page 131 here, but also, of course, her book on hooking with t-shirts. But she also shows you in this chapter finishing and hemming. So there is information on that subject, which is always tricky, finishing and hemming. Right? I'm going to come to that image in just a minute. So a little bit on everything, right? Because there's always, once I'm finished with the rug, what do I do with it? How do I make the edges pretty so I can display it or use it? There's a section on care and cleaning of your rug, right? She's an expert on that subject. There's a section on designing your own rugs. She shows you her transfer techniques, and she transfers with window screen, like window screening, right? We all have our different ways. I use fiber tape. Judy uses window screen. There is no right way. You just try them all and you see which one is best for you. There's lots of others. So, for example, with this image, this is one of my favorite images of the book. Wait till you hear this, right? I just want to come back to where the picture is. There it is. So, this unfinished rug probably dates to the 1960s and was hooked with fabric strips. I finished it with yarn. Believe it or not, I didn't have to dye any yarn for this project. Either I found the colors in my stash, or I was able to buy commercial yarn in the colors that I needed. If you put your nose right up to the rug, you can tell which side was hooked with fabric strips and which with yarn. But from a distance, it appears seamless. Isn't that remarkable? Isn't that remarkable? And that just goes to show another benefit of using yarn is you can collect bits and pieces. If you picked up a partly done rug like this, you would probably be thinking, I'm never going to be able to match these colors, and maybe I don't like dyeing. It's going to be a thing. Well, over time, you could go to your thrift store. You could look for sweaters, that very color of rust or that very color of periwinkle. And over time, it depends on how aggressively you shop and how quickly you want to finish the project, you could gather all the colors in yarn. Whether you're using, thrifting materials, recycled materials or not, it would be a fun project. Absolutely astonishing. She moves on in chapter 4 to projects. She gives you a whole bunch of projects in this book. Wait a minute, I moved too forward to that slide. So let me come back to you for just a second, and then I'll come here. So she starts moving to projects, a whole bunch of projects that you can try. For example, she starts with the welcome flag, and all of the projects in this book are super fun. She gives you the templates like this, right? So it's super easy to photocopy them with the binding open, and she shows you how to transfer and hook each one. Super, super helpful. So that piece that I was just showing you is in this chapter. It's called Chinese Basket, 9 by 13. She says, I believe it's a pearl gown design hooked with wool yarn on burlap. She hooked it herself, Judy Taylor. So she took an older pearl gown design, and instead of hooking it in traditional wool strips, which we're used to seeing with gowns, right, with all rugs from this era, she hooked it with yarn. I think it's just interesting to show it really doesn't look any different than if it had been hooked with wool strips. This is another great image. This is Mort and Woody, 60 inches round, custom designed and hooked by Judy Taylor. Another example of wool yarn on linen. In this example, notice the sort of striations in the house, right? The house is not a solid blue. In the border with all the fruity tooties around the edge, striated, right, mixed, because we tend to associate that hit or miss or marble cake style where it's not quite even or solid with using wool strips. Well, guess what? You can also do that same technique using yarn. Can you put yarn hooked rugs on the floor? Donna, you can, but it's the same story as always. If it is a synthetic or if it is like a different material, yarn is the most durable and hard wearing. So for anything on the floor, if it's done in yarn, it's going to be the most hard wearing material. If it's done in blends or other mixes, depending on the content, it'll be less durable. But yes, people have traditionally put rugs on the floor that are made of cotton, that are made of plarn, right, plastic bags. People have done that. It just becomes a question of the parts of them, depending on the fiber, can wear out faster. Not at an alarming rate. I would say give it a shot. You know, most of the I would say all of the early rugs that we see from the middle 1800s are not hooked with wool. They're hooked with silk, taffeta, rayon, lining fabrics, cottons, a little bit of yarn, homespuns, right? They're not hooked with wool, and they survive. Now, many of them are tatty. It has been a long time, but they were used on the floor. So it just becomes a question of how hard wearing do you need to know that that rug is. And if you're like, I'm good with cotton, I'll keep an eye on it. If it seems like it's going south and it's falling apart too quickly for me, I'll take it off the ground, clean it, and get it up on the wall. It depends on how you feel about that. Oh, thanks, Mom. Thumbs up, please, for these videos. I love those braided rugs. Oh, thank you so much. That's a braided one I got when I was away on the Cape. And this is my Amish toothbrush rug. I was going to do an Amish toothbrush video because I teach that a lot. I've been teaching that a lot lately. But I'm going to do a video too. I started recording it, but I screwed it up and I cut a bunch of pieces out. It was like an hour-long video. So I need to re-record. But I'm going to get a video up to show you how to do that because it couldn't be any easier. Lynn said, I put my yarn punched rugs on the floor. I use monk's cloth and 100% rug wool yarn. So you have choices, right? You can if you want, but if you prefer to do stuff with different materials, you can also do that, right? Acrylic is very hard wearing too. Most rugs that are mass manufactured are acrylic rugs at the end of the day, aren't they? They're not necessarily 100% wool unless you're sharpening it like Garnet Hill or one of those. I'm just looking for where, here we go. So the next chapter is on, I'm going to kind of blaze through Best Friends. This is another project. So she shows you this great project called Best Friends. These are the kinds of adorable and quaint, I'm not showing you all of the projects in this book because I want you to be surprised. But the projects that she has chosen for this book are absolutely astonishing. They are so pretty. This is another pretty piece, Jacob Iris. So it's like the Jacob goat up top and the iris is down below and the Celtic knot in the center, designed and hooked with natural colored homespun yarns on burlap by Judy Taylor. So using the, not coloring them, right? Using the wool exactly as it comes off of the animal. You get the browns, you get the whites, the off-whites, the grays, the blacks, right? But very sort of a limited color palette without dyeing, but so beautiful, so beautiful. I'm just gonna push through because this is such a good book. I don't wanna chop it up. The next project for you is 5 Points Celtic Mat, another extraordinary project. And again, she's giving you the templates for it. I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to you here. It's this one, right? That's another project in this book. She's really walking you into hooking with yarn. This is a great beginner book, right? So she sets you up with projects where you will have success. She doesn't set you up for failure at all. She has a lot of really beautiful Celtic rugs that she does in this book. This is a Celtic knot that she designed and hooked, 48 by 52, wool yarn on linen. Look at the colors in this rug. It is just extraordinary, isn't it? Oh, Alicia, I will be doing that one. I was so disheartened that I messed up the editing of it and killed it. But I will be doing it again. It's right at my fingertips. I'm certainly going to do it next week. This one's already running out. Whew. So she does a lot in this chapter, the Celtic design project. She does a lot with showing you Celtic projects that she's done. Like these. This is another one that's like colors directly from the animal, right? Celtic table runner. And in every chapter for each of these different projects, she's showing you what materials you need. So she's telling you each time exactly what you need. I love this one. May God hold you in the hollow of his hand. I think that is so beautiful. She's got a remarkable amount of Celtic rugs. And oh, look at this picture. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you using this? I mean, she's got such cute pictures of her animals in this book that it's crazy. And I just had to do more of these Celtic knots. This one really brought me to tears last night. This one is, I'm going to read what she wrote. This is called Celtic Love Knot, 48 by 52, designed and hooked by Judy Taylor, wool yarn on linen. The poem in this rug was written by my late brother, Mark Peter Ford, who died when he was 18 years old. You can read more about Mark's work on page 134, and she reprinted this. I am getting the book on her brother. It's like tragic, terrible accident story, but his poetry, so beautiful. I just want to show you in this rug, I want to read you what this rug says, if I can get through it, because it is super sad. If you look closely, there's text through it. And the poem of this rug, I'll show you the rug while I read the text. Look for the text in it. This is what is embedded in this rug. This entire excerpt is hooked with yarn into this rug. It says, "The lover lives in a small world where love is the moving force. Why tell him life is not as good as it could be? Heartbreak is the only tender hold we have on innocence. And if he should never come to the realization that the universe is heartless, is that a loss? We boast of knowing the facts of life, but is it not we who have lost them? The universe would continue to hiss and clank should love leave it, but it is a hopeless task to make him believe it. I do not promise to love forever unless man does live forever, but I do promise to love you as long as I am." I mean, all of that is written into this rug. It's choking me up. It's all written into this rug. I think that is so beautiful. That is one of her brother's poems. And she wrote "start here," kind of in the center, if you see there on the center right, so you would know where to start. That's not part of the rug. But absolutely beautiful projects in this rug and in this book. And you know, it's a good point looking at that one, the image that we just looked at also makes the point. I'm going to run a little bit over, way over, because it's supposed to be a half-hour show. Makes the point that when you use yarn, right, because it's quite thin depending on your gauge, you can hook words with a lot of ease, right? So that's something else to think about. Hooking with yarn versus hooking with wool strips. It is quite easy to hook text, even that kind of dense text, long passage, with yarn. I think that's another good point and a good argument for trying out yarn. Now her next chapter is called Chapter 7, A Tisket, a Tasket. This is another project chapter. She's showing us a basket weave. So this project is a basket weave, and she does so much in this chapter with background, right? So she uses this poster. She's showing you this poster: waste not, want not, prepare for winter, save perishable foods by preserving now. And she writes, "Waste not, want not is an adage or homily that seems to have been with us since the 16th century, mainly as a parenting device to urge recalcitrant little munchers to clean off their plates if they know what's good for them." Answers.com cites this sum. She says, "What sterner rendition of the phrase from a 1576 document?" It reads like this: "Willful waste makes woeful want." Right? Basically the same phrase that they used in World War II, but different phrasing in 1576. But anyway, she talks about in this chapter, the Tisket, a Tasket, the basket weave chapter, she talks a lot about the hit or miss rug, making a hit or miss rug, the scrappy nature of it, and the scrappy origins of hooking as a craft. She also talks about dyeing in this chapter. She names specific colors, and she talks about, this is a whole page I'm showing you here, at the top, putting together batches of yarns that you plan to use in your hit or miss rug, and then dyeing them, over dyeing them in pots. So in this example, she's got kind of a turkey red pot, pine green pot, and a gold pot at the bottom. These yarns will all retain some of their original color or patterning, texture, of course, but as you use them hit or miss style, and let me come back to show you the project, they will be married together, right? So they will have similarities because they have the same color families built in. It's a really smart thing to do. There are not a lot of books that show you all of these, I went to the next project too fast, but show you all of these techniques in the same book. This is another one of her pieces. The Tisket, a Tasket, by the way, is so in-depth it's crazy. This one's called Demelza, designed and hooked by Judy Taylor, wool and mohair yarn on linen. In the chapter that this sort of prefaces, she talks about, guess what? Making your own frame. Now she always makes these pipe frames, the DeLovely frame, lightweight, breaks down easily. You can put it in your rug hooking bag, take it with you. She gives you such detailed, really extensive and complete directions about making this kind of a frame. Pages and pages, right? Pages and pages. So you know that if you are looking to make a frame, right, instead of buying one, you will be able to do that without a doubt. And I thought it was really cute. She even says, like, hey, if you want to make a custom, it looks like she spray painted this frame gold here, which I thought was so funny. Why not, right? And then getting toward the end, I'm just running through the chapters with you so you know what kind of content is in this book. Double Vision. This is a great chapter where in this chapter, she talks about, you're going to get it as soon as I start showing you some images. She talks about the same rug being hooked multiple times. So in other words, if you feel like, gosh, I'm not that good at color planning or whatever, look at some of these examples of rugs that she's showing you the patterns for so you can make these rugs by blowing them up. But she's showing you multiple choices for hooking each of them, multiple color plans. And you can either say, yes, that speaks to me, this one speaks to me more. But there are pages and pages in this double vision chapter of rugs that might speak to you that you could, hook on your own and with multiple color plans in place. And this is the last, I think this is the last image. I have one more for some reason. But this is at the end of the book. That you can't imagine how long that double vision chapter is and how many rugs are featured in there in all different color plans. Super eye candy. And then she comes to chapter 10, which is the gallery. And pages and pages and pages of work, including the one that I was just showing you. I'll pull it back up. Pages and pages of interesting work in the gallery section. People who have hooked with yarn. And the piece that I was showing you is this one, Aztec calendar, 60 inches round, adapted and hooked by Judy Taylor, wool yarn on linen. Now, what did I do? I had one more photo here. Okay, that's the gallery page, so I already showed you that. So the gallery brings us right up into the end of the book. And then at the end of the book, there are long descriptions of the different other books she has, like Breaking the Boundaries, fantastic. All of her books, fantastic. Save That Rug, right? These are all books that we covered. It goes right, the book about her brother, right, and his beautiful poetry. She did a beautiful section. Judy, thank you so much, on Ribbon Candy Hooking. Look who that is, where she promotes the channel here, the videos, all the things that we do, the way that we get together and talk and brainstorm. She promotes all of that. And she certainly didn't have to. I appreciate that so much. But she gives that at the end as one of the resources for rug hookers who are trying to learn, trying to gather information, trying to be inspired. You can't always be hooking. Sometimes you need to be gathering inspiration, getting fired up, synthesizing an idea, building up some confidence, right? It's not always doing. Nothing is ever just doing. We would be exhausted if we were always doing. We have to do a lot of supply gathering, information gathering along the way. So that resources section of our book is extremely helpful. I recommend this book so highly. I really do. I really love Judy, and I feel like this, if you're getting one book this year, get this book, right? And my book will be coming out later this year. I'll remind you to get that one too. But absolutely, you have to get this one. You must get this one. This is so helpful, useful, and as far as being an inspiration book, it is. If there's 10 out of 10, I'm not going to be stupid and say 11. It would be an 11. But it is a full 10, without a doubt. It is as good as it can be. There's absolutely nothing missing or lacking. And I feel that she covers, as a beginner book, it's great, right? As a beginner book, it's ideal. And for people who have been hooking for a long time, it is an amazing inspiration book. So it covers all the bases. And I think it was like $25 in the link that she sent. So make sure you look for it there because it is a brand new book. And you're not going to find it in other places. You will only find it on her site. So Judy, thank you so much for sending this book. I had such a good time last night going through it and reading it and looking at all these great ideas. It was after the day before with the trouble on the website, it was like the pendulum swung, very far in 48 hours. And it just made me, I was feeling so bad about stuff in general. And it made me feel so happy to read it and to see Judy giving such great tips, such great ideas, being so positive, being so helpful, pushing this craft forward, pushing people to try and to do and to get in there and forgive your mistakes and trust yourself. And, it was all positive messages. So I really appreciated getting it. You're cleaning off space on your bookshelf. It is fantastic. It really is fantastic. So I hope that you enjoyed that review. Judy, thank you so much again for sending it. I really, really love it. Appreciate you putting something on Ribbon Candy Hooking in there too. I really appreciate it. Long show today. I will be back. I will be back with you on Friday because it is Canada Day, so I'm going to make that work. I'll probably do a shorter show, and we'll just look at rugs from Canada. If you are a Canadian and you have done a Canada themed rug or any rug in general, I'd like to look at rugs that are Canadian rugs, like the Riddermere rugs, the Garrett Blue Nose rugs. I'd like to look at a few of those, the Grenfell rugs, the Chetty Camp, all of that stuff. Anything Lillian Burke, anything like that. I would love to talk about that, look at that stuff on Friday with you. So I will get as much. It's a question of getting as much content together as I can before Friday, because tomorrow I promised the kids that I would take them to New York City, and we're driving into Times Square in the car because I cannot deal with the train. I'm not sitting on the train for 2 hours. I'm just not doing it. So we're driving into the city tomorrow, and the kids want to go to the Nintendo store and everything else. That's going to be like an all-consuming. But I will work on the Canada show today. If you have anything that you could send me, please send it sooner rather than later, because I'll be putting that together this afternoon and tonight. And have a great day. Tomorrow I'll be posting some pictures, if you're friends with me personally, of the kids going crazy in the Big Apple. And I will be with you on Friday for Canada Day. Have a good day. Until then, my email is ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Send me what you can, and I will look forward to seeing you at 7 p.m. for cocktail night on Friday night, this coming Friday night. I'll